Live from the Suma office, this is MuniCast, municipal podcast that tackles the topics you need to know. And I'm your host, Sean Wiskar. This podcast is brought to you by SaskTel's Innovation and Collaboration Team. SaskTel can help you sort through the noise to create solutions that add value quickly. Whether it's reducing your environmental footprint, driving investment, community development, or just saving money, contact your SaskTel account manager to find out more. On today's episode, I sit down with Lumsden CAO Merkosky and Lumsden Mayor Bryan Matheson. We're going to talk about the mayor-CAO relationship and how it can help you govern your community. There's lots to discuss, so let's jump into it. Monica, I want to start with you. You've held the role of CAO in many different communities as well as assistant CAO. And when you're looking at kind of all of the different communities that you've worked in over the years, what are some of the main challenges that you've seen come up time and time again for different councillors? And how have you really seen them kind of work to overcome this?
Sometimes when you're in a smaller community, it's difficult to keep personalities out of the conversation. And it also, the smaller the community, the more likely you could be accused of having, I guess you could call it a conflict of interest. I remember in one community, a fella sat on the regional park board, and his son applied for a summer job at the regional park board and didn't get it because his dad sat on that board, and they were afraid of how that might look. And I thought how unfair that was, that they were stinging volunteers for being volunteers, and his kid couldn't get a job. And that becomes a problem, because then you have smaller communities, you'll have staff who could very well be related to elected officials or even married to. The appearance of a conflict is there, but as long as everybody conducts themselves in a professional way, they can get past all of those problems. You know, if you think you have a conflict, why not just declare and leave the room instead of daring people to accuse you of having a conflict and leaving people in a position like that. But in other communities, I see that there were problems because everyone was afraid of raising taxes. We can't raise taxes. Everybody will be upset. But if you don't continually at least keep up with a cost of living, you'll soon fall behind, and it'll be very difficult to establish any kind of substantial reserve where you can do meaningful capital projects. So I'm afraid that property tax increases are just part of life. And I'm not saying go willy-nilly and spend money. Of course, we want to save where we can, but you can only cut so much before you start bleeding.
Bryan, I think this might be a good opportunity to bring you into the conversation. Obviously, you served the role of councillor and then also the role of mayor for the last several years in Lumsden. Talk about kind of some of the challenges that you had starting off in your role, and then also as you've developed into multiple terms, kind of some of the challenges that you've seen come up for new councillors in Lumsden.
I've certainly been blessed with working with councillors for the most part who are motivated to do their best job for the community. The few times that we've had issues has almost always been special interest. This is my pet peeve, or this is something that I need to get done because I think it will benefit me and a couple of my neighbors. That's always a problematic situation for a council. The thing that I've noticed in dealing with a number of other communities in in my mentoring time has been that personalities become a big issue, and I'm the boss, you have to listen to me attitude by both counselors of I'll say experienced counselors or mayors who think that they have more power than the other 6 people on council. And it's really important that everybody realizes it's one vote, one person, and everybody has the opportunity to provide input. And it's really important that everybody does provide input. So I think the big issue is personal agendas that cause the biggest problems.
And one of the questions that we see come up time and time again as we go through kind of trainings and different webinars is from a counselor is, how do they know that they're doing a good job? How do they know that they're serving their community to the best of their ability? And so I'd welcome thoughts from both of you. We've talked a lot about conflict of interest and some of the pitfalls that you can find when you're starting out as a counselor, but how do you know that you're on the right path as a counselor?
I would say that it's twofold. We have our council self-evaluation that they fill out annually, where they each have a series of questions, and they just have to sit back and think about the last year and how they did. And it always really brings you back to what your purpose is. And then the other part of that, sometimes it's difficult to measure what the public thinks of you. That's why it's important to interact with the public on a regular basis, and given an opportunity to share their thoughts, most people will take it, whether it's a positive reflection on what you've done or even just an opportunity for people to say, why did you do that? Sometimes your hands are tied by law and you must act a certain way, and the general public doesn't always understand those things. So being open with people, whether it's going to be criticism you're getting or a bouquet, it's really important. What do you think, Bryan?
Absolutely correct. Being open is really crucial. One of the things I find right now with conflict of interest, it's kind of the soup du jour, if you will, and it's very important. Don't get me wrong; it's very important. But some people use that now as an avenue to say to somebody that disagrees with them on council, well, you've got a conflict of interest, and they don't. They're simply expressing a different viewpoint. So that's become a little bit of an issue for me as to how quickly people jump to that defense of their ideas and somebody disagreeing with their ideas. But to your question, how do you know you're doing a good job? I think Monica mentioned the tool that we have of self-evaluation, which is pretty critical, I think, for everybody. And I think you probably know you're doing a good job when you go home after the meeting and review what happened, and you say to yourself, yeah, I was honest with that. I was upfront. What I'm doing is for the community. If you look in the mirror and say, that maybe isn't the best way of handling that, you probably have to reevaluate what you're doing. But a lot of it is self-evaluation, and nothing better than actually doing it to find out if you're doing a good job.
Absolutely. And I think evaluation is a huge part of a counselor's role, whether it be for yourself or also just kind of evaluating your municipality, ensuring that things are running efficiently and that you're on the same page as your CAO. I think that takes us to our next question, which is a good question. What should a council be expecting of their CAO, and how can they ensure that they're on the same page and working in tandem with the administration?
That's a great question. Quite often that's the issue with councils. For me, I've always tried to make sure that my CAO knows that I support them totally. And they have to screw up before that's going to change. They can make mistakes, and that's going to happen with everybody. But as long as they're doing things to the best of their ability and being upfront about it, they're going to have my support. One of the things that I think is important for CAOs is to be on the forefront of change, being aware of what's new happening and what's out there for new activity or new opportunities for communities and for council. Technology is changing so rapidly that it's important for municipalities to keep up in that area. And I'm sure it's very, very difficult when you're a one person or a two person office, but it's very, very crucial that they keep up to the trend or to the new technologies that are available to them. So I'm not sure if I answered your question, but I think it's really crucial to show support, and not just show support, but give support to your CAO and make sure that council is not overloading them with work, but they are not avoiding work as well by saying, I'm just too busy.
And Monica, do you have any thoughts on how you can ensure that you're on the same page as your town administration?
I think that it's important for council to evaluate their CAO every year. And part of that evaluation can state what the goals are for the upcoming year. Council can list their goals, administration can list their goals, see how they marry, and what is realistic on what can be done and what cannot be done. And Bryan brings up a good point about keeping up with the times. And I am not going to sit here and pretend that I'm some kind of IT specialist when I know I'm not. So I am very honest with them on what I know and what I don't know. And if your CAO tells you she doesn't know about the particular thing that you're trying to implement, then that person needs to be given the green flag to, bring in a consultant. Then if you don't know how to do this, you don't want to do it wrong or half, but you should support your CAO and recognize that we can't possibly know everything, because the amount of different topics coming through the door are unbelievable. And a CAO has to feel like they can admit what they don't know and ask for help. And that help might cost you a couple $1,000 to get a consultant to come in and help you write a request for proposals if you're changing out your phone system or your computer systems. So don't be afraid to ask for help and admit where you don't have strengths.
I think that's a really important point, Monica. We've heard in multiple presentations that CAOs sometimes can be expected to be, legal counsel, engineers, IT specialists. There's a lot asked of a CAO. And I think especially when we look at Lumsden's office, you have the town of Lumsden there as well as the RM. So it offers you kind of a really unique position where you're able to work with both the urban side and the rural side. And I'm wondering if you have any advice to kind of some of the CAOs and councillors there that are in these, smaller villages and towns on how they can kind of best cooperate and work with their surrounding RMs to kind of accomplish their goals.
Well, I would think that having an annual meeting would be a really good start. I know that our town and the RM, they have individual councils. It's not like we're a county or a district. They have individual councils, but they meet once a year. They have supper together. They give the highlights of what it is that is important to them at the time. And meeting with people face to face makes everything more human. Maybe someday we'll all be able to sit down in a room and have 25 people for supper again. Who knows? But communication is important, and listening and understanding what the barriers are. And I know for as long as I've been in this career, it seems that RMs and towns have taken issue with the funding arrangement around recreational facilities. And they feel like the farm kids are coming in and using the rink and not contributing to the tax base that operates that rink. And we need to charge those farm kids a higher rate to come in and skate first, because town kids' parents who are subsidizing this place. And everybody's just got to get in a room and talk. And you really have to, it has to be fact driven, not emotional. You have to say, this is what it costs us to run the rink. We lost $200,000 last year. So is there anything you can do to help us keep this rink open? Figures. Let's talk facts.
Bryan, I'll welcome you into this conversation around regional cooperation. And what are some steps that the town of Lumsden has made to kind of work with partners in the region?
Well, I think Monica hit the nail right on the head. Talking, communicating, and meeting with people is really crucial. I recall a meeting we had a few years back, and we were trying to propose some regional cooperative movement or an activity, and this was the first time we had done it, and there was lots of negativity in the room where people were saying, well, you called this meeting, what are you trying to get out of it? What's in it for you? There was not a working together to say this is for us. It was what's in it for you. We had a similar meeting a couple of years later on a bit of a smaller scale, but we made a very concerted effort to just talk and have people talk about what's happening there. And it was just a sit down and talk. And it was tremendous. And from that meeting, lots more avenues were explored. People were talking about what can we do together. So it's really important to talk always, yearly, and things will come out of that if you start the conversation. But don't start a conversation by saying, I need this from you. Start a conversation that says, let's talk. Can we work together? Is there something that you've got going that we can work with you, or maybe there's nothing going on, but eventually something will come out of it. So plan your communication, plan your meetings, and follow through with them. Even if you think there's nothing to talk about, a couple of hours having coffee and just getting to know the other people is well worth your time, and it will help the communities that are represented a tremendous amount.
We're getting to near the end of the interview. I really want to thank both of you for taking the time to sit down with me today. I just want to take a moment to talk about the future and looking at Saskatchewan municipalities 10, 15, 20, 30 years from now. Where do you think it is that we're going, and how do you think that municipalities can kind of form these long-lasting and strong bonds in their community to ensure that the town of Lumsden is thriving 20 years from now, and it's, even bigger than it is now?
Well, I'm just polishing my crystal ball. I think one of the things that you said there is crucial. I don't care if we're bigger than we are now. We need to be better than we are now. And that's really important, that everybody improves and is able to make their communities better. Obviously, regionalization is being pushed at us at every turn. So we have to expect that that's going to be happening. And back to the conversation a couple of minutes ago about talking to people ahead of time will probably help that occur. The new technologies like electronic cars or better Wi-Fi or better connections and those types of things are things you have to work for, and I'm sure we'll all be better off in the future. But working together to make this is a tough one, making everybody better. And I know some people are going to say, how can you do that? But I think you can keep your community strong and still have strong neighbors as well. And I think working together is the key there.
Bryan touched a little bit on regionalization, and he's correct there. That is inevitable. And with the new laws that have come down about having to have a certified administrator, I mean, there's a shortage, and it's a big responsibility, and small communities can't always either afford to pay a qualified administrator or be attracted to come to a smaller community. So they may be forced to cooperate with their neighbors in order to have their administrative responsibilities met. So that's coming. I don't know if it'll be in my career, but regionalization is certainly on the horizon.
Perfect. Well, I want to thank you two for sitting down with me today and having this conversation. I think we were able to go over a lot of really great topics and touch on some things that are going to be really helpful to our members. So thank you again, and we sure appreciate this. This brings us to the end of episode 5 of MuniCast. We hope you've enjoyed season 1 of MuniCast so far. A reminder that if you've missed any of the previous episodes up to this point, you can listen to them now on Spotify, Google, Apple, YouTube, or anywhere else you get your podcasts. If you found any episode in season 1 of MuniCast helpful, we would sure appreciate it if you shared it among your networks and promoted the podcast to Saskatchewan municipal leaders. We think this educational content is extremely valuable to our members, and we hope that it can reach a wide audience. And we look forward to bringing you the final episode of season 1, our interview between Moose Jaw Councillor Crystal Froese and Regina Mayor Sandra Masters. And now, here's a preview of our final episode, which will be releasing October 13th. We hope you enjoy.
If you want young people to show up to vote and become engaged in civic or provincial or federal politics, you got to go to where they are.